Shame is a powerful, paralyzing emotion. It's not the same as guilt. Guilt says, I did something bad. Shame whispers, I am bad. And for the narcissist, this whisper is deafening. They build their entire persona, every exaggerated story, every inflated accomplishment, every attempt to control or dominate around keeping that voice silent. The shame they carry is often rooted deep in their early experiences, where worthiness was conditional, love was transactional, and vulnerability was punished, not protected. You see, narcissists don't wake up one day deciding to become emotionally manipulative or damaging. Somewhere in their story, they were made to feel that their authentic self wasn't enough, that being flawed or messy or real would lead to rejection or abandonment. Instead of facing that shame, they made a subconscious choice. I will never feel this weak again. And so begins the performance. The mask, the denial when a narcissist hurts you, through lies, betrayal, emotional games, or stone. Cold silence, there is a part of them that knows. There is a part of them that registers, however briefly, that they crossed a line. But admitting that means confronting the very wound they've spent a lifetime escaping from. To face their own wrongdoing would require them to admit that their actions don't match their image of perfection. It would mean lowering the drawbridge to their tightly guarded emotional fortress. That is a risk they are unwilling to take, because behind those walls lies a shame they are convinced will destroy them if touched. So instead of remorse, you get rationalization. Instead of empathy, you get excuses. Instead of an apology, you get silence, or worse, blame. They say things like, you're too sensitive, or I only did that because you pushed me, or you misunderstood me. Every deflection, every accusation is a desperate attempt to keep that shame buried. Because in their world, accountability feels like annihilation. Vulnerability feels like weakness, and being wrong feels like being unlovable. What's tragic is that this shame doesn't go away. It festers, it turns into chronic insecurity hidden under arrogance or fear disguised as control. They may seem confident, even untouchable, but it's a performance. One that's powered by fear of being exposed, and the more you hold up a mirror to their behavior, the more they feel that fear rise. But instead of acknowledging it, they double down, they gaslight, they ghost, they rage, because anything feels safer than admitting they hurt someone they claim to care about. Even when you leave, even when you go silent and choose peace over chaos, that shame doesn't vanish. It just slips deeper into the background, like a shadow that follows them into every new relationship, every new cycle of hurt. They may pretend they're fine, they may post, boast, or flaunt their life, but the reality is they're constantly running. From you, from truth, but most of all, from the shame they refuse to name. Control is the oxygen that narcissists breathe. It's the silent motive behind their manipulation, the force behind their cold indifference, and the thread that ties together every game they play. But here's the truth most never realize. Their hunger for control isn't born out of strength. It's born out of fear. Specifically, the fear of vulnerability. They are terrified of being seen, not just admired. They are afraid of being known, not just followed. Because to be truly known is to be at risk of rejection. And that is a wound they never want to reopen. To a narcissist, vulnerability is a battlefield they refuse to enter. They've often grown up in environments where emotions were unsafe, where love was earned and affection was conditional. Vulnerability was associated with weakness, and weakness was punished. So they learned early on, never let anyone close enough to see your soft spots. Always stay one step ahead. Always be the one in control. That control became their survival strategy. It became their shield. But like any shield held too long, it eventually becomes a prison. When they hurt someone, especially someone who loved them deeply, It's not always about cruelty, it's about self-preservation. They strike first before they can be hurt. They reject before they can be rejected. They manipulate to feel powerful because the idea of surrendering their heart, even for a moment, feels like death to their carefully constructed identity. Vulnerability to them is the ultimate threat, not because they don't feel, but because feeling makes them human. And being human means being flawed, uncertain, and worst of all, dependent on someone else emotionally. This is why they lash out when you express your needs, why they disappear when you get too close, why they mock your emotions or twist your words. It's not just about making you feel small, it's about making themselves feel protected. If they can control how you see them, how much you get to know them, and how you respond to them, then they don't have to risk being seen in their raw, unfiltered truth. That truth includes insecurity, self-doubt, shame, and a desperate longing for love they don't believe they deserve. When you finally stop trying to decode them, when you detach from their chaos, when you stop giving them the emotional power they once held over you, it terrifies them more than they will ever admit. They may act indifferent. They may replace you quickly or act like they've won, but beneath the performance is panic. Because control has slipped through their fingers, the grip they once had on your mind, your emotions, your reactions, it's gone. And now they're left alone with the very thing they were trying to avoid all along, themselves. This is why they often circle back. Not because they've changed or grown, but because they want to regain the upper hand. They want to feel powerful again. Vulnerability on your part, when you were kind, forgiving, and open, made them uncomfortable, but your boundaries, your silence, your self-respect, that terrifies them even more. Because it exposes a truth they can't control, you are no longer willing to trade your soul for their approval. And in the world of someone who fears vulnerability, that kind of strength is unthinkable. Narcissists often give the illusion of being unaffected when someone walks away from them. They portray themselves as cold, indifferent, even relieved. But the moment you detach, when your emotional availability fades, when your silence replaces the constant explaining, defending, and hoping, you leave behind a silence that screams louder than any confrontation. That's when the emptiness begins to echo inside them, and the most painful part of that emptiness, they can't admit it, not to you, not to anyone, sometimes not even to themselves. They feed off emotional supply. Your attention, your reactions, your anger, your love. It's all fuel. As long as you were emotionally invested, you were feeding their sense of self. Whether it was through affection or conflict, as long as you responded, they felt significant. Your emotional presence validated them, even if they couldn't reciprocate in healthy ways. But when you detach, when you truly unplug your energy from their chaos, they begin to feel a void that they don't know how to fill. They may try to cover it quickly, with distractions, with a new relationship, with exaggerated displays of happiness. But none of it actually nourishes them. It's surface level coping for a deeper hunger they refuse to acknowledge. That hunger isn't necessarily for you as a person, it's for the feeling of being needed, admired, chased, or prioritized. When you no longer provide that, they are forced to confront an internal emptiness they've been running from all their lives. It's an emptiness built not just from your absence, but from years of emotional disconnection from themselves. The narcissist may not feel loss in the same way a deeply empathetic person does. They don't grieve with tears and reflection. They feel loss as a threat to their identity. You were part of the structure that kept their ego intact. Your validation, even during fights or breakdowns, was a signal that they still mattered. When you stop responding, when you stop defending your worth, when you stop seeking their approval, they feel erased not just from your life, but from the emotional power they once held. They often respond by pretending it doesn't bother them. They will post carefully curated moments to seem unbothered. They may even tell mutual friends how free they feel, but this is part of the facade. Deep down, they feel unsettled. Something they controlled is now gone, something predictable. Your emotional availability is now closed off. And that emptiness starts to reveal a deeper truth. They were never as in control as they pretended to be. Sometimes they return not because of love or realization, but because they miss the feeling of being central in your emotional world. They miss being important, even if it was through arguments or tears. They miss the supply, but they can't say this out loud because it would mean admitting need. And narcissists equate need with weakness. Instead of saying, "I miss the attention," they say, "You were too much." Instead of saying, "I feel alone," they say, "I'm better without you." This denial of emptiness is their way of holding on to pride, even as the silence you left behind haunts them. There are moments, brief and often buried, when a narcissist feels the weight of what they've done. These moments usually come in stillness, in solitude, in the quiet spaces between distractions where the noise of performance and pretense fades. It might be in the dead of night, staring at a ceiling they once shared with you. It could be when they see a picture, a memory, a message they forgot to delete. For a split second, something real pierces through the wall they've built, and regret creeps in. This regret, however, is not like the kind most people experience. It is not grounded in empathy or a heartfelt apology. It is not a full-bodied acceptance of having caused pain and wanting to make amends. It is fleeting, it is terrifying, it is a crack in their constructed identity, and they rush to patch it as quickly as it appears. Because true regret requires responsibility. It demands introspection, a willingness to sit with discomfort, and most of all, change. These are things narcissists are rarely willing to embrace because it requires them to acknowledge something they spend their entire lives trying to avoid, that they are not perfect and that they are capable of harming others. When a narcissist remembers your kindness, your support, your consistency, the things they once took for granted or manipulated, they may feel a pang of sadness or longing. Not because they fully grasp what they've lost, but because a part of them realizes you were genuine and they were not. That truth stings. It exposes their emotional fraud. It forces them to briefly confront the fact that they had something good, and they destroyed it. But rather than face this truth with humility, they suppress it. They rewrite the story. They convince themselves you were difficult, dramatic, unstable, or ungrateful. They reframe your departure as abandonment rather than accountability, because in their version of events, they can't be the villain. They always have to be the one wronged, misunderstood, or provoked. This is why even if they feel regret, they won't tell you. Admitting regret would mean admitting fault. It would mean giving you power they believe belongs to them. It would mean exposing themselves emotionally, which feels unbearable to someone who has built their identity on emotional superiority. So instead of reaching out with vulnerability, they often retreat further into their ego. They find comfort in distractions, in new admiration, in shallow affirmations that silence the voice trying to remind them of what they did. But that voice doesn't go away. It just gets quieter under the noise of avoidance. And the more authentic your love was, the more present your honesty, the more that voice lingers in the background. It reminds them that you saw them, that you cared for them, and that they pushed you away. It reminds them that they once stood at a crossroads: connection or control, truth or denial, and they chose the path that felt safer, not the one that was right. They regret this, if only for a moment, but the moment is swallowed by fear. Because regret is a mirror, And looking into it means acknowledging the parts of themselves they've spent a lifetime trying not to see. There's a silence that echoes louder than any words ever could, the silence of someone who finally stops trying, stops explaining, stops proving their worth. Narcissists are used to cycles: conflict, blame, apology, manipulation, and then reconciliation. They thrive on emotional push and pull. They expect you to return after every storm, to fight for the relationship, to justify your pain and seek their approval. But when you don't beg, when you don't reach out, when you simply walk away with your dignity intact, something inside them shatters. Not because they love in a deep or transformative way, but because you broke a pattern that served their ego. Narcissists often seek partners who are empathetic, nurturing, emotionally intelligent people who will work hard to maintain a connection, even when that connection becomes toxic. When you refuse to chase them, you remove the fuel that keeps their false self alive. You're not just rejecting a relationship, you're rejecting the identity they tried to project. This becomes deeply unsettling to them, not only because they lose control, but because your silence becomes a mirror reflecting the truth, that you saw them clearly and chose yourself instead. In the mind of a narcissist, control equals importance. If they can make you cry, doubt yourself, or fight for them, they feel powerful. They interpret your pain as proof that they matter. But when you respond with calm detachment, when you heal, grow, and move forward without bitterness, it confronts them with a truth they are unequipped to process. It shows that their worth wasn't as inflated as they believed, and your absence becomes a void they cannot fill with validation from others. You become unforgettable not because of how much you gave, but because of how you left. Narcissists are haunted by the person who didn't collapse when the mask came off. The one who saw through the manipulation and still chose silence over drama. The one who didn't beg, plead, or justify. That kind of strength unsettles them. It reminds them of their lack of real emotional depth. It reminds them that they were never as central to your world as they needed to believe. Even if they move on quickly, even if they jump into another relationship or paint a picture of success and happiness, there is a lingering discomfort. Your strength highlights their emotional immaturity. Your peace highlights their inner chaos. Your boundary becomes the one thing they couldn't manipulate, and that sticks with them far longer than any argument or reconciliation ever could. They may pretend to forget you, but they remember. They remember the calm in your goodbye. They remember the power in your silence. They remember how you didn't need them to close your chapter. You haunt them not with desperation, but with grace. Because in a world where they expect others to collapse under their coldness, your decision to rise became the one thing they couldn't predict, control, or explain. That kind of exit doesn't just sting, it lingers. It whispers the truth they're afraid to hear, that real strength doesn't chase validation. It walks away when respect is no longer served. One of the greatest fears a narcissist carries is the fear of being truly seen. Not seen as charming or confident or successful, but really seen, seen beyond the mask, seen beyond the rehearsed expressions, the polished lies, the manipulated truths. Because beneath the surface, a narcissist lives in fear that someone might glimpse the insecurity, the inadequacy, the shame they try so desperately to conceal. And when you see through them, when you see their games for what they are, when you recognize the manipulation and emotional distortion for what it is, it threatens the entire illusion they've built around themselves. You weren't supposed to understand what was happening. You weren't supposed to wake up from the emotional fog. You weren't supposed to piece together the moments that didn't make sense, the gaslighting, the contradictions, the sudden shifts in affection. But you did, and that changes everything. Because once someone sees the truth The narcissist can no longer maintain their power through confusion. You became clear. You became emotionally grounded. And that clarity cut through their performance like a blade through fog. What unsettles them most is that your clarity took away their camouflage. While they may be able to fool others with charm or charisma, they know they can no longer fool you. And this terrifies them because being seen is exposure. And exposure is danger in their world. The narcissist survives by wearing emotional armor. They control the narrative by controlling perception. But when you stop reacting the way they expect, when you stop seeking their approval, stop falling for their games, stop defending yourself against false accusations, they are forced to confront the fact that they've been unmasked, even if they pretend to be unbothered, even if they say things like, "You misunderstood me," or "You were always too dramatic." Underneath the surface, there is a growing panic, because they know they've lost the ability to manipulate your view of them. And for someone who equates control with worth, that's a devastating loss. They may respond with rage, silence, or even fake remorse, but it's not rooted in genuine self-awareness. It's a last-ditch effort to regain control over how you see them, because they can't stand the idea that someone walks the earth with a clear image of who they really are. What's more threatening than being exposed is the knowledge that you walked away with your truth intact. You didn't need revenge. You didn't need to destroy them. You just needed to know the truth. And once you had it, you chose peace. That terrifies them. It strips them of the narrative that they are the victim, the misunderstood hero, the one who was wronged. Instead, they are left with the undeniable evidence that someone loved them, saw them clearly, and still chose to leave. They may go on to smear your name or revise history to others, but deep down they are haunted by the fact that you carry a version of them that no mask can erase. You saw the cracks in the armor. You saw the fear behind the rage, the insecurity behind the arrogance, the weakness behind the control. And they know that nothing they say, post, or pretend can ever undo what you now know. In the end, it's not your presence that unsettles them. It's your perception. Because while they can hide from almost everyone else, they can never hide from the eyes that saw the truth and walked away unshaken.